So I want you to picture something. You are sitting at your kitchen table, and it is early.
Oh, yeah. Like that very specific kind of early.
Exactly. That early where the rest of the world hasn't really woken up yet. The only sound in the entire room is just the quiet, rhythmic hum of the refrigerator.
The best time of day, honestly.
It is. And you're sitting there, and you wrap your hands around your favorite ceramic mug. You know the exact one I'm talking about.
We all have that one mug.
Right. It has that tiny, little chip right near the handle. A little imperfection you've probably traced with your thumb 1,000 times without even realizing it. And you can feel the heat seeping through the clay. You can smell that slightly bitter, earthy aroma of dark roast coffee rising up. It is a moment of profound, quiet peace.
Until you look down.
Yeah, until you look down. The screen of your phone illuminates the table.
It always ruins it.
It totally shatters the peace.
Yeah.
You open an app or, a digital spreadsheet, and you just start reviewing your monthly expenses.
And instantly, the whole physiological state changes.
In the span of a single heartbeat, that peace vanishes. And this familiar, almost metallic tightness just grips your chest.
Your breathing gets shallower, faster.
The warmth of the coffee is just completely forgotten.
It's an incredibly universal experience. I mean, that sudden, visceral, physiological shift you're describing, what you were experiencing right in that moment, isn't just... it's not just an emotional reaction.
Right.
It is a massive biological cascade. Your amygdala, which is, the brain's threat detection center, has just flooded your entire nervous system with cortisol.
And along with that cortisol spike comes this profound sense of frustration. Because, if you're listening to this right now, you work hard.
Absolutely.
You pour an endless tide of hours, an endless tide of energy into your days. You give it everything you have.
And yet,
true prosperity, that feeling of genuine, unshakable financial autonomy, it always feels like this horizon you can never quite reach.
like a mirage.
Exactly. You walk toward it, and it just recedes further into the distance.
It's really the great paradox of modern life. You're expending an immense magnitude of effort, yet the needle barely moves.
Right. And you look around at other people, and you can't help but wonder, why? Why does the act of acquiring and keeping wealth feel like pushing a massive, rough-hewn boulder up a sheer mountain cliff for some of us?
Well, for others, it just flows.
Yes. It seems to flow as effortlessly as a river finding its way to the sea.
Huh.
And they don't seem to be working at some massively different multiplier of effort,
No, they rarely are.
Yet the outcomes are entirely distinct.
Well, the issue is that we tend to internalize that difference as a moral feeling.
Oh, completely.
We tell ourselves, we aren't disciplined enough, or we aren't intelligent enough.
Or we just haven't found the right mechanical strategy yet.
Exactly. We constantly look at the outward mechanics. But that struggle you were describing, that exhausting uphill battle, it's almost never a failure of character.
Right.
It is not a lack of effort. It is an inherited operational baseline.
An inherited operational baseline. Okay, wait. Let's unpack this, because that is exactly our mission for today's exploration.
It's a huge concept.
It is. We are going to map the invisible architecture of your mind today.
Yeah.
We're looking at the subconscious programming, the deeply embedded behavioral psychology that quietly and invisibly dictates your entire relationship with prosperity.
And the actual neuroscience of how to rewrite those hidden scripts.
Yes. So let's start with that machinery, because I think we all like to believe we are these highly rational, logical beings making perfectly calculated economic decisions about our resources.
Right, the whole rational actor theory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the reality of human behavior is quite different from that, isn't it?
It is radically different. We operate under this really comforting illusion that our conscious, logical mind, our prefrontal cortex, is the captain of the ship.
But when steering the wheel.
Exactly. But the conscious mind is actually remarkably limited in its processing power. Oh, yeah. The subconscious mind, on the other hand, is this incredibly vast processing network. It takes in an endless tide of sensory information every single second.
Like what kind of information?
Well, it calculates the temperature of the room. It tracks the subtle micro-expressions on the faces of the people around you. It monitors background noises, the smell of the air, everything.
So it's constantly scanning.
Constantly. It is fundamentally a primal survival engine.
A survival engine, not a financial planner.
Precisely. It is not a logical philosopher.
Right.
It does not care about your conscious dreams of, retiring on a sunny beach. And it certainly does not care about the logic of your spreadsheet.
Because it care about the math.
Not at all. Its primary overriding directive is homeostasis.
Okay, homeostasis.
Right. It wants to keep you safe by keeping you aligned with what is familiar. It works entirely on automated behavioral scripts and deeply ingrained neural coordinates.
Wait, I'm getting a little stuck on this concept of homeostasis when we apply it to wealth.
Okay, sure. Like, I understand how the body regulates physical temperature or blood sugar or whatever, but how does that apply to a bank account? I mean, I think that refrigerator analogy we were discussing earlier is probably the perfect way to visualize this mechanism.
Oh, the refrigerator is a great analogy. So think of a standard kitchen refrigerator.
Okay.
It has an internal thermostat. Let's say that thermostat is permanently set to a freezing baseline.
Right, it's locked in at freezing.
Exactly. Now, you might open the door, look inside, and realize your fresh produce is covered in frost and completely ruined.
Which is incredibly frustrating.
You'd be furious. You might yell at the machine. You might leave the door wide open to let the warm kitchen air in, hoping to thaw it out.
So you are consciously, actively trying to change the environment inside that box.
Yes. You are taking aggressive external action. But, and this is the key, what does the refrigerator do?
It fights back.
Exactly. The moment its sensors detect that warm air, its compressor kicks into overdrive.
Oh.
It works furiously. It hums loudly. It burns an immense magnitude of energy, doing everything in its mechanical power to force that temperature right back down to freezing.
It stubbornly labors to return to the baseline it was programmed to maintain,
Exactly.
because that doesn't possess the capacity to know that frozen produce is bad.
No, it has no subjective opinion.
It just knows the command, maintain freezing.
It has no moral judgment about the temperature. It only executes the code. And our autonomic nervous systems do the exact same thing with our financial reality.
That is wild.
In psychology, we refer to this as a tolerance for allostatic load.
Allostatic load. Break that down for me.
It's essentially the amount of chronic stress your body is accustomed to carrying.
Okay.
If your internal baseline is set to the stress of scarcity, your subconscious will view any deviation from that baseline, like, say, a sudden surplus of resources, as an anomaly.
Wait, it views the surplus as a bad thing.
It views the lack of stress as an error that needs to be corrected.
Wow. Let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around the biology here. A fridge has a literal wire connecting the thermostat to the compressor. What is the wire in my brain? Am I just like releasing stress hormones every time I see a positive bank balance?
In a way, yeah. The wire is a deeply myelinated neural pathway connecting your perception of money to your amygdala.
Okay.
When you experience reality that contradicts your deeply held baseline, even if that new reality is objectively better, like having more money, it creates cognitive dissonance.
And cognitive dissonance feels bad.
It triggers anxiety. To alleviate that anxiety, your brain subtly influences your behavior, your impulses, and your decision-making to return you to the familiar state of stress.
So let me get this straight. Even if I consciously want to build wealth, even if I am actively working extra shifts, I'm studying market trends, I'm doing everything right, my own brain is acting like that compressor.
Yes.
It is secretly working against my conscious desires just to bring me back to my familiar freezing point of financial anxiety.
That is the unseen friction. You are fighting your own automated survival mechanism. You are trying to use the limited bandwidth of your prefrontal cortex to overpower a massive, deeply ingrained autonomic response.
Okay, here is where we have to look at the origin story of this mechanism.
Right.
Because if we are operating on this hidden code, the obvious question is, who wrote the code?
Right.
And when you look at the timeline of human cognitive development, the lion's share of our mental architecture is forged in the very dawn of our lives.
It is established long before we even possess the language to articulate what is happening to us.
Exactly.
I mean, the initial stages of human life are a period of massive, unfiltered data absorption.
A sponge.
A total sponge. A young child's brain is highly plastic. It's essentially operating in a continuous state of recording, just downloading the rules of reality from their immediate environment.
Let's paint a picture of this observation, actually.
Yeah.
Imagine a toddler sitting on a rug.
Okay, picture the toddler.
You walk up to them and hand them a crisp, freshly printed, high-value banknote.
Right.
Now, to you, that piece of paper represents a significant portion of your rent, or maybe a week's worth of sustenance. It carries immense conceptual weight.
Massive weight for the adult.
Right. But to the toddler,
It is nothing more than raw sensory input.
Exactly. They don't see intrinsic value, they just see paper.
Yeah.
They feel the slight woven texture of the material. They hear the sharp crinkle it makes when they bend it.
They might crumple it into a ball.
They might tear it right down the middle. Or, honestly, most likely, they might just try to put it directly into their mouth to see what it tastes like.
Which is perfectly logical from their developmental perspective.
Because they haven't learned it yet.
Exactly. They have not yet been programmed with the abstract collective fiction of commerce. A banknote is no different than a dried leaf or a colorful wooden block.
So the meaning of that paper is entirely learned.
Entirely.
And they don't learn it from formal lectures.
Oh.
They learn it from the giants walking around them, their caregivers, the towering figures that dictate the parameters of their entire universe.
And this raises a really critical point about the mechanics of human learning. We do not absorb this programming through direct instruction.
Right. A parent rarely sits a very young child down and delivers a thesis on macroeconomic theory.
No, never. We absorb this programming through something much more primal. Mirror neurons.
Mirror neurons.
Yeah.
The brain's mimicry system.
Exactly. Our brains are biologically hardwired to mirror the emotional states of those around us, particularly our primary caregivers.
Because that ensures social cohesion and survival.
Right. We are highly attuned to their nervous systems. So a child might not possess the cognitive ability to understand the mathematics of a mortgage,
But their mirror neurons perfectly replicate the heavy, oppressive physiological anxiety that falls over the dinner table when a stack of billing envelopes is opened.
precisely. They feel the tension.
That resonates so deeply.
Mm.
Because it's not the big lectures. It's the small, repetitive, everyday moments.
The micro moments.
It's hearing hushed, tense arguments bleeding through the bedroom wall late at night.
Or standing in the grocery store aisle.
Yes, asking for a specific item and just watching your parent's face suddenly tighten with stress and profound exhaustion before they quickly snap a denial.
And what the child's highly plastic brain is doing in those specific moments is executing Hebbian learning.
Hebbian learning.
Yeah, there is a foundational principle in neuroscience. Neurons that fire together wire together.
Ah, I've heard that phrase.
It's crucial. The child observes the tension, the fear, the physiological exhaustion of a parent returning from a grueling shift.
Right.
And the child's brain fires neurons associated with resources simultaneously with neurons associated with threat and pain.
Oh, wow. So it physically fuses those concepts together.
It creates a physical bridge in the brain.
It writes a permanent neural script that says, the subject of resources equals the feeling of intense stress. Survival requires painful, endless struggle.
Yes. Or perhaps the environment dictates a script like desiring things causes conflict.
Oh, that's a big one.
Or
Yeah.
there is never a sufficient amount, and asking for more destabilizes the people I depend on for survival.
And these aren't just thoughts, right?
No, these do not remain passing thoughts. They solidify into deeply embedded cognitive biases. They become foundational truths about how the physical world operates.
Okay. I need to push back here for a second because this can sound incredibly dark.
I understand why you'd say that.
I hear what you're saying about inherited baselines and scarcity programming, but frankly, this sounds a bit like we're blaming the victim.
How so?
Well, if someone is working multiple grueling shifts just to keep the lights on, facing massive systemic economic hurdles, telling them they just have bad childhood programming, feels incredibly dismissive of actual objective economic gravity.
Yeah.
Are we just biological puppets playing out a financial tragedy we didn't write?
That is a very fair question, and it is a crucial distinction to make. It is vital we do not dismiss the reality of external economic friction.
Because it's real.
Systemic hurdles are completely real. The gravity of difficult circumstances is absolutely real. However, our discussion today is focused on the internal locus of control. We cannot instantly rewrite the external economic systems of the world, right? But we absolutely possess the biological capacity to rewrite how our minds navigate those systems. It only becomes a tragedy, and we are only puppets if we remain entirely asleep to the internal program.
Asleep to the program, meaning we assume our internal reactions are just unquestionable reality.
Exactly. The overwhelming majority of individuals walk through their entire lives completely unaware that their cognitive baseline is running on legacy software.
Legacy software. That's a great way to put it.
They believe their chronic financial anxiety is just a fundamental, unchangeable personality trait.
Or just the unavoidable objective reality of the universe.
Right. They do not realize it is an inherited echo. Awareness is the first wedge in the door.
So how does that awareness actually look in practice?
The moment you observe your own physiological reaction to a bank statement, that tightness in your chest,
Yeah.
and you consciously ask yourself, wait, is this my objective assessment of the data, or is this the cortisol baseline I inherited from my environment?
Just asking that question changes things.
That is the exact moment the neural pathway begins to lose its absolute authority.
Wow. You are creating space between the stimulus and the response.
Exactly.
You are separating the observer from the programming.
You realize you are not the legacy software, you are the biological hardware that happens to be running it.
And the defining characteristic of human hardware is neuroplasticity.
Exactly. The software can be overwritten.
That is incredibly empowering. It moves us from a state of passive victimhood to active architects of our minds.
It does.
But, it also leaves us into a really fascinating and honestly a difficult biological reality. Because even when we achieve that awareness, transitioning from those deeply ingrained childhood scripts to new adult behaviors is not a smooth, frictionless road.
Not at all.
In fact, our brain actively, aggressively fights the change.
It fights it fiercely, and it does this due to the supreme biological imperative of energy conservation.
Energy conservation.
Right. The human brain is an absolute marvel of evolution, obviously, but it is an energy glutton.
It takes a lot to run it.
It consumes a massively disproportionate share of our body's daily caloric intake. Because it requires so much energy to operate, it is constantly, ruthlessly seeking ways to conserve power.
And it does this by automating everything it possibly can.
Exactly. When you repeat a thought pattern or a behavior over and over, your brain wraps the corresponding neural pathway in a fatty substance called myelin.
Myelin.
Yes, myelin acts like insulation on an electrical wire. It makes the signal travel faster and requires vastly less energy to execute.
This is what a habit is, biologically speaking.
Yeah.
A heavily myelinated pathway.
You got it.
It's like it creates a paved superhighway through the forest so you don't have to hack through the dense brush with a machete every single time you want to make a decision.
That's a perfect analogy. And here is the critical catch. The brain does not possess a moral compass regarding which pathways it myelinates.
Right.
It does not evaluate if the habit is objectively beneficial for your long-term joy or your prosperity.
It doesn't care if it's a good habit or a bad habit.
It only evaluates familiarity. Familiarity means a paved highway. The highway requires less glucose to traverse. Therefore, whatever is familiar is deemed safe by your primal survival engine.
Wow. Even if that familiar thing is constant, grinding financial panic.
Even if it is chronic scarcity.
That's so counterintuitive.
It is, but biologically it makes sense. If you matured in an environment where the topic of resources was a source of constant friction, where there was always a looming crisis, your nervous system physically adapted to that specific level of cortisol and adrenaline.
So that heightened state of alert literally became your neurological baseline.
Yes. Your subconscious feels strangely, paradoxically at home in a crisis because it possesses the heavily myelinated pathways to navigate it.
It's a chaotic, exhausting home, but it's the only home the nervous system knows.
It is the comfort of scarcity. Peace, calm, and an abundance of resources, on the other hand, represent the unknown.
And the unknown is terrifying to the brain.
Because to navigate the unknown, the brain has to abandon the paved highway. It has to start hacking through the brush again.
Which requires immense cognitive load.
It burns glucose. And to a primal survival engine, a sudden spike in energy consumption is interpreted as a profound biological threat.
This reminds me of a real-life example that perfectly captures how physically exhausting the unknown can be for our brains, even when we are totally safe.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Let's talk about the mechanics of driving.
Yes, this is a brilliant example.
So imagine you, the listener, have driven a vehicle on the right side of the road your entire adult life.
Okay.
You know exactly where the mirrors are. You know the precise amount of pressure to apply to the pedal. You can navigate a complex, busy intersection while sipping a beverage and listening to an audiobook.
It takes near zero conscious effort.
Right, you are a master.
Because the entire process has been offloaded to the subconscious. The pathways are incredibly thick with myelin.
Exactly. But now, imagine you travel to a different country where the infrastructure requires you to drive on the left side of the road.
The whole system is flipped.
And the steering mechanism is on the opposite side of the cabin. You step into the driver's seat, and suddenly, the entire spatial map in your brain is rendered completely useless.
And pay attention to how your biology reacts in that exact moment.
You reach for the gear shift with your right hand, and you just hit the door panel. You glance up at where the rearview mirror should be and see nothing but the passenger seat.
The confusion is instant.
And you feel like a terrified, uncoordinated beginner.
Yes.
Your heart rate spikes. Your palms are sweating. You grip the steering wheel so tightly your knuckles turn white.
You're burning massive amounts of energy.
You have to turn off the radio. You tell everyone in the car to be perfectly quiet because you need absolute total silence just to calculate how to pull out of a simple parking space.
Every single tiny movement requires massive, exhausting prefrontal cortex override.
Right. And you're completely safe physically, but your brain is panicking.
That intense physical and mental exhaustion you experience in that vehicle is the exact same biological friction you experience when you attempt to change your deeply ingrained financial programming.
Wow. The brain despises this friction.
It hates the sudden, massive spike in cognitive load required to process a new reality. It longs for the familiar paved highway, even if that familiar highway is full of dangerous potholes.
So when we try to adopt a mindset of abundance, or when we try to execute a new positive financial habit, our brain is essentially screaming, turn around, get back on the right side of the road. You are burning too much energy. This is dangerous.
It is a profound shock to the nervous system. And honestly, this biological reality explains a fascinating yet deeply tragic societal phenomenon.
What's phenomenon?
Well, we see the ultimate undeniable expression of this cognitive shock when individuals with a deeply entrenched scarcity baseline suddenly experience a massive windfall.
Oh, like winning a vast lottery jackpot or receiving an unexpected massive inheritance.
Exactly. When someone who has lived their entire existence with the subconscious thermostat firmly set to survival suddenly comes into a vast constellation of wealth, what does everyone assume?
The common assumption is that their struggles have evaporated forever.
Right. That is the universal cultural fantasy. Just deliver the winning ticket, drop the bag of resources on the table, and life transforms into a permanent vacation.
But the statistical reality is a staggering tragedy.
It is. The overwhelming majority of these individuals do not ride off into a peaceful sunset of sustained prosperity.
Not at all. Within a remarkably brief passage of time, they lose every last fragment of it.
Yes. They engage in bizarre, catastrophic investments. They squander it on depreciating liabilities. They give it away with reckless abandon.
And a significant portion face profound emotional, social, and sometimes even physical ruin.
It's devastating.
So we have to ask the critical question, why? Why would an individual who intimately knows the painful, grinding reality of poverty actively, aggressively sabotage their only escape from it? It completely defies all conscious logic.
It defies conscious logic, yes. But it perfectly follows the logic of identity protective cognition and allostatic load.
How?
The subconscious mind does not perceive this sudden, massive abundance as a blessing.
It doesn't see it as good luck?
No, it perceives it as an existential threat to its familiar reality. The cognitive load required to manage, protect, and integrate this massive new variable is just too high.
Oh, it's the warm kitchen air hitting the open refrigerator.
Exactly. The sensors detect a massive anomaly. The internal thermostat detects a terrifying deviation from the baseline.
So the wealth literally feels alien to them.
Entirely alien. It demands a set of operational models like financial literacy, boundary setting, risk assessment that the person's nervous system simply does not possess.
The pathways aren't there.
The internal tension, the cognitive dissonance becomes unbearable. So what happens? The subconscious goes to work.
It kicks the compressor into overdrive.
Yes. It quietly, ruthlessly manipulates decisions, amplifies impulses, and drives self-destructive behaviors, working overtime to shed the wealth.
It literally burns the house down to get back to a room temperature it understands how to survive in.
It forces a return to the safe baseline of scarcity. Because navigating the familiar panic of having nothing is a highly myelinated skill they have mastered.
But navigating the unfamiliar peace and responsibility of immense wealth is a language their brain has never learned to speak.
That's exactly it.
That is deeply sobering, but it clarifies so much. I mean, it demonstrates, without a shadow of a doubt, that external resources are completely powerless to change a life if the internal operational model isn't equipped to process them.
Which leads perfectly into a really profound thought experiment.
Oh, I love this one.
It's one often discussed by those who study the deepest mechanics of commerce and human behavior. It is an exploration of what would occur if we attempted to manually, artificially force absolute equality upon the world.
I find this concept fascinating. Let's construct the scenario for the listeners.
Okay.
Imagine we possessed some form of supreme, unchallengeable global authority, and we decided to gather all the wealth in the entire world.
every single asset.
Every piece of precious metal, every digital currency, every acre of property, we pool it all together into one unfathomably massive mountain of resources.
Right.
And then we distribute it completely, mathematically, equally among every single living person on the planet. Everyone wakes up on this specific day with the exact same balance.
A completely level, mathematically perfect playing field.
Right, the ultimate reset. So if we run the simulation forward, what happens? Does it stay level?
The outcome, as hypothesized by those who deeply understand behavioral economics, is that it would be incredibly short-lived.
Really?
Yes. Over the passage of eras, and honestly, likely much faster than we might comfortably assume, a balanced equilibrium would reestablish itself.
But it wouldn't be an equilibrium.
It would emphatically not be an equilibrium of equality.
The wealth would migrate. It would revert back toward the original state.
Yes. The resources would gradually, inevitably flow right back into the hands of those who possess the internal mental architecture, the operational models, to manage, organize, and multiply it.
The people whose internal thermostats are biologically set to a baseline of abundance and systemic growth.
Exactly. Because they possess the highly myelinated pathways for long-term planning, for delayed gratification, and for risk management.
They know how to handle the heat, so to speak.
They understand how to exist comfortably alongside value without their amygdala triggering a threat response.
Meanwhile, those whose internal baselines are programmed for the friction of scarcity
Would inadvertently, through 1,000 small, unconscious decisions driven by cognitive dissonance, empty their pockets once again.
They would shed the weight to alleviate the subconscious pressure. They would spend it just to feel safe again.
The wealth acts precisely like water in a landscape.
Oh, I like that imagery.
It relentlessly flows to the lowest point of resistance, gathering in the vessels that are structurally designed to contain it. The physical currency, the external resource, is really just a shadow cast by the internal programming.
So if the external world is just a lagging indicator of our internal operational scripts, then trying to acquire more resources without first changing the script.
It's like trying to change the plot of a movie by yelling at the projection screen.
Wow. A completely futile expenditure of biological energy.
Exactly.
Okay, we have thoroughly diagnosed the problem. I feel like we really understand the mechanism now.
I think so too.
Recognizing this faulty programming, seeing the legacy software for what it is a massive first step. But fixing it, rewiring the hardware, that is the real challenge.
Yes, the how is always the hardest part.
How do we actually change the thermostat? How do we build new myelin?
To understand the biological mechanism of change, we need to shift our perspective on how our brains interact with the world.
Okay.
Let's introduce the concept of the reticular activating system, or the RAS.
The reticular activating system.
Yes. And I like to use the metaphor of a radio receiver for this.
I like this. Grounding the biology in a physical object.
The space around you right now, wherever you happen to be existing as you listen to this, is not empty.
Right.
It is saturated with an unfathomable density of information. Visual data, auditory signals, opportunities, subtle patterns. It is an endless tide of data.
It's overwhelming if you really think about it.
But you do not perceive a chaotic, blinding roar of noise. You only perceive a tiny, highly filtered fragment of reality.
Because my brain would short circuit if it tried to process every single leaf on every single tree.
Precisely. Your reticular activating system acts as the filter. It decides what information gets passed up to your conscious awareness and what gets completely ignored.
And how does it decide?
It filters for information that confirms your deeply held beliefs and baselines. It only tunes into the station you have programmed it to seek.
Oh. So if my internal receiver is programmed with the belief that opportunities are scarce and life is a struggle, my RAS will literally filter out the data points of opportunity right in front of me.
Yes. You'll be functionally blind to them. They will be there, but your brain won't let you see them. Now, if your receiver is tuned to a station broadcasting a chaotic, sorrowful narrative, and you suddenly decide you want to experience a joyful, expansive reality, what must you do?
Well, you cannot yell at the receiver.
Right. You cannot threaten the speaker. You cannot force the external world to change its broadcast.
You have to reach out and manually, intentionally turn the dial. You have to reprogram the RAS to seek a different pattern.
Exactly. To experience a reality of abundance, you must tune your neural pathways to recognize the patterns of abundance. The resources, the connections, the solutions you desire already exist in the surrounding environment. Your biological filter is simply not allowing you to perceive them.
So how do we reach out and turn that dial in our own minds? Because there isn't a physical knob I can grab inside my skull. How do we force the brain to build new pathways?
This is where we enter the profound biological power of directed imagination.
Directed imagination.
And to illustrate the mechanics of this, nature provides us with one of the most remarkable analogies in existence: the biological process of metamorphosis.
Like a butterfly.
Consider the caterpillar.
The ultimate transfer.
Consider the operational reality of a caterpillar. Its entire existence is bound to the earth. It crawls incredibly slowly, it consumes immediate resources, its visual perception is highly limited, its reality is small and grounded.
Right.
But locked within the cellular biology of certain caterpillars is the genetic potential for something entirely alien to its current existence. They carry the latent blueprint for flight.
But they don't just grow wings and fly away on a Tuesday afternoon.
No.
The biological process is far more violent and complete than that.
It requires a profound dissolution of the existing self. When the caterpillar enters the chrysalis, it does not merely sprout new attachments onto its old body.
What actually happens?
It releases specialized enzymes that literally digest its own cellular structure. It turns into a biological soup.
A soup. That's incredible.
The old operational model is completely destroyed, but within that soup exist structures called imaginal discs.
Imaginal discs.
Clusters of cells that hold the specific, detailed blueprint, the biological imagination of the butterfly. Without this profound internal blueprint guiding the reconstruction of the soup, the creature would merely perish. It would remain a dissolved, chaotic mess.
It has to possess the exact coordinates of the future self to survive the destruction of the old self.
Yes. And humans possess this exact same capability executed through neuroplasticity.
We have our own imaginal discs.
Exactly. We have the profound, biologically unique ability to envision a self and an environment that does not yet exist in our physical reality. We can construct a highly detailed cognitive blueprint of a reality we have not yet touched.
But we need to be very careful here. We aren't just talking about passive daydreaming while staring blankly out a window, are we?
Absolutely not.
Because I think a lot of people hear words like imagination or visualization, and they immediately think of passive wishing. Just closing your eyes, hoping really hard, and waiting for a bag of resources to magically drop through the ceiling.
Passive wishing is biologically ineffective.
Right.
It does not trigger neuroplasticity. The brain knows the difference between a fleeting, abstract fantasy and a deeply ingrained, sensory-rich blueprint.
So how do we make the blueprint real to the brain?
To actually reprogram the reticular activating system, to turn the internal dial, we cannot use abstract thought. We have to communicate with the subconscious in its native language.
Which is?
We have to use the language of the physical senses. This is the neuroscience of sensory imprinting.
How does sensory imprinting actually work mechanically? Why do the senses matter so much to the subconscious?
The human brain is an astonishing organ, but it possesses a specific vulnerability, a feature, really, that we can intentionally exploit.
I'm listening.
The subconscious mind cannot easily distinguish between an event that is vividly, deeply imagined with intense sensory detail and an event that is actually occurring in the external physical world.
Wait, really? The brain processes an imagined smell the same way it processes a real smell?
Yes. Functional MRI scans demonstrate this clearly. When you vividly imagine performing a physical action, the exact same regions of your motor cortex light up as when you actually perform the action.
That's amazing.
The neurological hardware fires in the exact same sequence.
That is wild.
Yeah.
The brain is literally experiencing the imagined event as a physical reality.
But to trigger that powerful biological response, you cannot simply use logic.
Because logic is the wrong language.
Exactly. The logical, analytical left hemisphere of your brain deals with abstract numbers, spreadsheets, and the harder, objective realities of your current circumstances. It is firmly, stubbornly anchored in the present physical evidence.
This is the accountant.
Right. The right hemisphere, however, processes emotion, intuition, and spatial awareness. To create a new neural baseline, you must build a bridge between the conceptual desire and the biological reality.
And the physical senses are the bridge.
They are the foundational building blocks of human reality. So let's construct a real-world application of this.
Let's do it.
The most potent biological window to perform this imprinting is in the quiet moments just before sleep, or immediately upon waking.
Why then?
Because that's when your brain waves naturally slow down from active beta waves into alpha and theta states. In these states, the rigid barrier between the critical conscious mind and the highly programmable subconscious mind becomes porous.
Okay, so you are lying in bed, the lights are out, the environment is quiet, your heart rate is slowing down.
You close your eyes. Now, the critical error most people make is simply picturing a vague, abstract concept like being wealthy.
Which the brain can't process.
The brain cannot process that. You must construct a highly specific, granular reality. You must put your consciousness inside the physical vehicle of your new life.
Okay, let's build this sensory landscape right now. Walk me through it.
Imagine you are operating a completely different vehicle, a machine that represents the exact level of prosperity you are aiming for. But do not observe yourself from a third-person perspective. You must be inside the body.
Looking out through your own eyes.
Yes. Feel the specific, supple texture of the material on the steering wheel beneath your palms.
Okay.
Notice how the density and temperature of the material feels entirely different from the worn surfaces of your current vehicle.
I can feel the smoothness, maybe the slight tactile resistance of the heavy stitching against the pad of my thumb, the weight of the wheel.
Yes. You are firing the sensory cortex. Now, expand the input. Imagine you are walking out onto the terrace of a structure in a beautiful, distant haven.
Feeling the environment.
Feel the ambient temperature shift as you step outside. Feel the specific wavelength of warmth from the sun radiating against your skin and the slight humid density of the breeze brushing across your face.
I'm pulling in the olfactory data now. The distinct, sharp aroma of salt water mixing with blooming, exotic vegetation.
Excellent.
Or maybe it's early morning in this new reality, and I smell the rich, complex aroma of dark roast coffee. But this time, the tactile feedback is different. I'm holding a heavy, flawlessly smooth glass mug instead of chipped ceramic.
Perfect. You are layering the data. Now bring in the auditory signals. Hear the highly specific sounds of this reality.
Like what?
The satisfying crunch of gravel under premium footwear, the crisp, distinct sound of turning the heavy pages of a newly printed book. Bring in taste, the complex richness of a meticulously prepared meal.
It's a full-body experience.
You must inhabit this biological simulation completely. By doing this, you are manually writing a new coordinate into your internal navigational system.
You are telling the subconscious this is not an abstract fantasy. This is a memory of an environment we have already successfully navigated.
Exactly. You are forcing the autonomic nervous system to acclimate to the physiological feeling of abundance without triggering the amygdala's threat response.
Because it feels familiar now.
Yes. By repeatedly, consistently visiting this vivid sensory landscape, you lay down new myelin. The subconscious begins to accept this environment as the new familiar baseline. The internal thermostat resets.
That is so profoundly powerful because you are entirely bypassing the critical, logical brain that's shouting, look at the spreadsheet, we are in danger.
Slipping right past it.
You are communicating directly in the raw sensory language the subconscious relies on. But knowing human nature, I imagine there's a very easy way to accidentally short-circuit this delicate rewiring process.
Oh, there is a highly common cognitive trap. The absolute quickest way to sever this fragile, newly forming neural pathway is to allow the analytical mind to violently interject with doubt.
The prefrontal cortex crashing the party. The how and the when.
Precisely. The moment you successfully construct this beautiful, neurologically rich vision of prosperity, and then you open your eyes, look at your current ceiling, and immediately demand of yourself, but how mechanically is this going to happen? What is the exact timeline?
What happens when you do that?
You introduce massive cognitive friction into the system.
You rip the dial right back to the old station.
You tune your receiver directly back to the frequency of scarcity. Asking how in that vulnerable moment implies neurologically that you do not believe the state is real.
Because if it were real, you wouldn't need to ask how it happened.
Exactly. It reinforces the baseline of lack. In the realm of neural reprogramming, absolute certainty is the only valid mechanism. You must assume the physiological feeling of the wish already fulfilled.
That sounds incredibly challenging.
It is. You must carry the emotional resonance, the lowered cortisol baseline of that future reality, with you into your waking hours, without demanding that your conscious mind instantly produce the architectural blueprints of how the external world will bend to deliver it.
You have to walk through your current, imperfect environment with the quiet, relaxed physiology of someone who already knows the final outcome.
You neurologically become the person who possesses the operational model of wealth long before the external resources physically manifest to match it.
Okay, this is fascinating, but it raises a massive flashing warning sign for me.
Let's hear it.
So what does this all mean for my actual day-to-day existence? Can I just sit on my sofa, close my eyes, deeply smell the imaginary coffee, feel the imaginary leather steering wheel, lower my cortisol, and then just wait for external prosperity to politely knock on my front door? Because that sounds like a highly effective recipe for having your electricity shut off.
Absolutely not. That is the great toxic illusion of passive wishing.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Because I can't just meditate my way out of a structural deficit.
No, you cannot. It represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the mechanics of human behavior and reality creation. Let's return to the radio station metaphor, but we must add the crucial dimension of physical kinetics to it. Think of the process like a complex dance.
Okay, I'm visualizing the dance floor.
You can perform all the internal neurological work, you can perfectly tune the dial of your mind, lower your allostatic load, and find the perfect, beautiful, sweeping rhythm of a grand waltz.
Right.
You can hear the music perfectly clearly in your mind. Your internal biological state is perfectly aligned with the rhythm.
But if I remain seated in the chair,
The music is functionally meaningless in the physical world. If you refuse to engage your motor cortex, if you refuse to extend your physical hand, if you refuse to move your feet across the friction of the floor, the dance never actualizes in reality.
it remains permanently locked inside the biological simulation of your mind.
The sensory imprinting aligns the internal filter, but physical action is the bridge that forces the external world to respond.
Ah, I see.
Visualization removes the internal biological friction. It trains your reticular activating system to eagerly recognize and accept external opportunities rather than violently rejecting them as threats.
So instead of fleeing from opportunity, you move toward it.
Yes, when your mind is tuned to the baseline of abundance, you suddenly miraculously perceive a path, a strategic connection, or a complex solution that was entirely, literally invisible to you when your brain was flooded with the cortisol of panic.
Because the filter was blocking it.
The data points of opportunity were always existing in your environment, but your biological filter was explicitly designed to ignore them.
Precisely. But once the RAS allows you to perceive the opportunity, you must engage the physical world.
Action is the mechanism that collapses the internal potential into external reality. Action creates the dopamine-driven feedback loops that solidify the new identity. You must stand up and execute the dance.
And part of that execution, part of aligning our physical movements with our new internal baseline, involves how we interact with the micro elements of our environment.
Yes, very much so.
You brought up a critical behavioral error earlier that most people make, a way we unconsciously sabotage our rewiring process every single day.
Yeah.
It's about how we treat micro resources.
This is one of the most profound indicators of an individual's true operational model. We consciously claim to desire vast, sweeping resources, but our physical actions show immense, deeply ingrained disrespect for the small fragments of value that cross our path.
Give me a tangible, everyday example of this behavioral error. What does this look like in practice?
You are walking down a busy urban sidewalk. You look down at the pavement near the edge of the street, and you spot a tiny, solitary coin. It is the absolute lowest possible denomination of currency. It is functionally useless in terms of modern purchasing power.
A microfraction of value. You couldn't exchange it for anything meaningful.
Exactly. Now observe the typical human behavioral reaction to this stimulus.
Well, the vast majority of people would simply step right over it. They
Yeah.
wouldn't even break the rhythm of their stride.
Right.
Or, if it happens to be directly in their physical path, they might even kick it aside in slight annoyance. It's perceived as debris, not value.
And in that singular, seemingly insignificant kinetic moment, you are transmitting a roaring, undeniable signal back to your own nervous system.
What is the biological translation of that signal?
You are stating, through physical action, I reject the accumulation of value. You are training your brain to ignore small gains.
Wow. Just by the simple act of stepping over a dirty piece of metal.
The subconscious mind, the primal operating system, does not comprehend the mathematical difference between a solitary low-denomination coin and a towering stack of high-value assets.
Because it doesn't do math.
It only understands the category of value. A solitary spark possesses the exact same elemental nature as a roaring fire. They are both fundamentally combustion.
And if your physical behavior proves that you are disdainful of a spark, your brain isn't going to expend energy trying to locate a flamethrower.
Exactly. In behavioral psychology, we see this as the paralysis of the all-or-nothing mindset. It is a symptom of scarcity.
Interesting.
To welcome the massive influx of resources, you must demonstrate to your nervous system a profound respect for the micro-influx. When you physically kick that coin away, you are reinforcing the neural pathway that says value is annoying, that you are arrogant toward the very concept you consciously claim to desperately desire.
And we reinforce this destructive pathway with our verbal habits constantly. I catch myself doing it.
We all do.
You're standing at the checkout line, experiencing the friction of transaction, and you sigh and say aloud to no one in particular, currency is just worthless paper now. The system is entirely broken.
Which is a devastating script to run through your own neuro-linguistic programming.
Because my brain is listening.
You are literally instructing your reticular activating system to treat your own life energy, the resources you traded your time to acquire, with absolute contempt. You are attaching a biological marker of worthlessness to the concept of acquisition.
And if my brain believes the resource is worthless, why would it ever authorize the massive expenditure of energy required to acquire more of it?
It wouldn't. It would treat the pursuit as a biological waste.
So how do we fix this?
True internal alignment means training the brain to recognize, acknowledge, and respect the category of value in all its physical manifestations, regardless of magnitude.
So if I see that solitary coin on the pavement tomorrow,
You arrest your momentum,
Yeah.
you physically bend down, you engage your motor cortex to pick it up.
right,
You do not do this because the fragment of metal will alter your macroeconomic reality. You do it as a physical behavioral exercise in acknowledging value.
it is a deliberate action that confirms to your nervous system your new internal baseline of abundance.
You are building the habit of accumulation.
That is such a subtle but massive pivot in how we move through the world. It perfectly highlights how our internal operational models dictate our external reality.
Yes, which brings us to the final, brilliant illustration of this principle, examining the sheer scale of our internal vessels.
Scale is so important.
Scale is the ultimate differentiator. The magnitude of what you can successfully interact with in the external world is entirely dependent on the structural capacity of the operational model you have built in your mind.
Okay, let's break that down.
We can look at this through the lens of linear versus exponential thinking.
Let's use the illustration to explore this.
Suppose you walk up to an individual whose operational model is firmly anchored in the linear exchange of time for basic survival wages,
Okay.
and you direct their attention to a masterpiece of engineering, a beautiful, highly advanced chariot of luxury, the kind of machine that represents the pinnacle of material acquisition. You ask this individual, how long will it take you to acquire that object?
And what do they say?
The individual's brain immediately runs a linear calculation based entirely on their current, highly restricted coordinates. They analyze their monthly wage input, they subtract their non-negotiable living expenses, and they isolate a tiny, fragile fragment of surplus that they might theoretically preserve.
They are executing the mathematics of linear scarcity.
Yes. They project this linear calculation into the future and conclude, if I preserve this tiny fragment perfectly every single month, it will require 5 years of strict, painful sacrifice to purchase that single vehicle.
Okay, that makes logical sense within their framework.
Now, you take that exact same stimulus, that exact same question, and you pose it to an individual who operates on an exponential model.
A pioneer of enterprise.
Yes, someone whose internal architecture is built on systems thinking and massive scale. You point to the exact same luxury machine and ask, how long will it take you to acquire that?
And their answer is different.
The exponential thinker might pause, their brain running a vastly more complex simulation, and then they might answer, it will take me 10 years.
Which is initially shocking to hear,
Right.
because the linear thinker calculated 5 years. Why would it take the titan of enterprise twice as long? Are they worse at math?
Because they are not interacting with the same reality. They are running a completely different cognitive software program.
Explain that.
The linear thinker looked at the physical object and calculated how to trade their personal biological time to acquire 1 unit of the object.
Just buy the car.
The exponential thinker looked at the object, and their brain immediately began calculating how to acquire the entire global enterprise that manufactures the units.
Wow. Their operational model couldn't even process the concept of merely purchasing a single consumer good.
The internal container was structurally too large for such a small transaction.
They're calculating complex supply chains, global distribution networks, leverage, and brand acquisition.
The physical stimulus, the car, was identical. But the internal operational model observing the stimulus dictated a fundamentally different, vastly larger interaction with the external environment.
If your internal model is the size of a thimble, an absolute thunderstorm of wealth will only ever leave you with a thimble full of water.
The excess simply washes away because there is no structure to contain it.
You must intentionally expand the structural capacity of the mind.
You must refuse to calculate your future potential based on the heavily myelinated limitations of your present circumstances.
This has been an incredibly dense, profound exploration of human behavior. I mean, if we zoom out and survey the territory we've mapped today, it paints a remarkable, scientifically grounded picture of our potential for transformation.
It is the biological architecture of self-determination.
We started in that quiet kitchen, feeling the heavy, painfully familiar physiological friction of our inherited baselines.
We examined how the silent, anxious observations of our early environments utilized mirror neurons to wire our internal thermostats to a freezing point of stress and struggle.
And we dissected the brain's stubborn evolutionary desire to conserve glucose, clinging desperately to the paved neural highways of scarcity simply because they require less cognitive load,
while violently reacting to the unfamiliar landscape of abundance as a biological threat.
And then we explored the actual neuroscience of the shift. We learned how to stop screaming at the external environment and actively reprogram the reticular activating system.
Utilizing the profound biological mechanism of neuroplasticity. Becoming the entity that possesses the blueprint to dissolve its obsolete legacy software and construct a vastly more capable operational model from the material of its own directed focus.
We talked about using deep, vivid sensory imprinting to bridge the gap between abstract desire and autonomic reality, forging new neural pathways while fiercely guarding against the destructive friction of cognitive doubt.
And finally, realizing that the internal simulation is useless if we don't engage the motor cortex and move into the world, that we must behaviorally respect the solitary spark if we ever hope to sustain the roaring fire.
It is a profound shift in operational reality. And, if we elevate this entire scientific and behavioral discourse to its ultimate conclusion, we arrive at a foundational truth that permanently alters how an individual perceives their interaction with the world.
It really does.
What is that ultimate conclusion for you?
That true, unassailable wealth is never the physical artifacts locked away in a steel vault.
No.
It is not the digital representations of value glowing on a screen in the early hours of the morning. Those external elements are entirely transient.
They can disappear.
They are merely the exhaust, the lagging indicators of value creation. They can be obliterated in a sudden macroeconomic shift. They can be reallocated. They can be washed away by the unpredictable, chaotic tides of global circumstance.
If the resource exists purely outside of your mind, you are always vulnerable to its loss.
Exactly. True prosperity, the only unbreakable permanent form of prosperity, is the cognitive capital you have painstakingly constructed within your own neurology.
The operational model.
It is the sophisticated, resilient operational model you have coded.
The internal architecture.
Consider the reality of a master builder.
Okay.
An individual who possesses a profound, systemic understanding of engineering and design. If a sudden catastrophe levels their workshop and destroys every single one of their highly specialized, expensive physical tools, does that individual cease to be a master?
Not at all. They haven't lost the capacity to build.
The true skill resides in the neural pathways of their brain, not in the physical hammer they were holding.
Precisely. They retain their mastery.
They simply survey the wreckage, calculate the new variables, and systematically begin to reconstruct their empire from the quiet, untouched, deeply myelinated sanctuary of their mind.
Because the actual wealth was never contained within the physical tools?
It was always generated by the cognitive framework that wielded them. Once you successfully build that internal architecture of abundance, no external circumstance can ever permanently impoverish you.
You have ceased to be a passive collector of resources.
You have become the engine of creation.
You become the engine itself. That is the ultimate horizon we are all capable of walking toward.
It is.
So, as you go about your movements today, as you step away from that table and move out into the complex friction of the world, I want to leave you with one final, lingering, analytical thought.
A question to deeply examine while you are navigating your environment.
Yes. Observe your current reality. What is the one deeply familiar, safe struggle you are stubbornly, repeatedly choosing to endure today, simply because your nervous system is terrified of the unfamiliar peace that would instantly arrive if you finally chose to solve it?